Okay, we'll move on to question 4, which looks at providing for cyclists. It's actually 2 questions, but we'll take them together. It states, should cycle parking standards for non-residential uses also require the provision of support facilities? And also, in mixed-use developments, should separate cycle parking and support areas be created to overcome different building management structures and increase security? So any points people want to raise in terms of that?
Simon Burkett, Knightsbridge Association. I think it's very clear that a great deal needs to be done to promote cycling, and I think we need to do both things. Where it's not possible to provide showers and things, we should still provide, cycle racks or whatever, and maximise the security through whatever clever ways possible, whether it's cameras or something. But if we can go further and make the whole process for cyclists more amenable, then that will promote cycling, and that's clearly essential in the years ahead.
Thank you. Gentleman on the right.
David Hart, Steer Davis Cleave. Worked on a couple of developments in Westminster where there have been, and this comes more from TfL side than Westminster, but some very excessive levels of cycle parking required for developments where if you actually work out a mode share, you would be supporting an approximate 15% mode share for cyclists, which is extremely ambitious. And whilst cyclists should be catered for, sometimes it seems to go a bit beyond what's sensible. But on the other side of that question, the provision of additional cycle facilities for other users, I think that's very important. And I think there just needs to be a balance, really, that there aren't excessive cycle standards set for what would be basement space that ends up being redundant, but also against providing shower and locker facilities for other users.
Okay, thank you.
I just want to say that it seems to me that if pedestrians are the priority, then cyclists have to be the next one down the list, and that we ought to be thinking about them in terms of their relationship to the pedestrian, that there is very little point in continuing to provide parking for bicycles if you don't provide places for them to ride on. And I think that incorporated into everything the council does, wherever it's possible, there ought to be demarcated, delineated, separated cycle paths for those people who need them. It's not for everybody, but there are many people who would cycle if they felt safer.
John Zammit again. Well, I think the shower provision, you have to look at the size of the development. I mean, have a criteria. Maybe large developments should provide some facilities, even if the office floors are individually let. So I think you should look at that. Generally on cycling, I'm always a bit amused that we have, I believe, on residential, 1 cycle rack per flat. I think it is. Is it 1 per unit? So I always think that only 1 person in the family cycles, but maybe some of the other units don't use their bike racks. And the second question, mixed use. Well, again, I think subject to the type of development goes in, I often see the residential and the commercial are separated from the provision of, cycle facilities. I don't see that's a particular problem. But what's something close to Danny's heart is in the UDP at the moment, nothing to his question, but I might as well put it in now, is there's no provision to provide motorcycle parking in developments, whether residential or commercial. So anyone who got a bike in those developments has to park on the street and now pay for it. But if there was provision within those developments, a standard set, there's all nooks and crannies in these basement developments where bikes could be accommodated. And so at the moment they park outside, wake everyone up. I know council get a minimal revenue from them. But I think there should be a policy to encourage provision for motorcycle parking within these developments.
Thank you. Gentleman here.
Pascal Bates for VIG. One thing about cycling that hasn't yet been mentioned is the Mayor's aspiration, which I understand is ongoing, to have a major scheme of hire, which would depend on him persuading or compelling councils like Westminster to agree to put large facilities for the deposit and pick-up of bikes all around the borough. There are 2 options. Either planning policy can be used to require developers to make available the space as part of the public planning gain, or large areas of the townscape at street level are going to have to be given over, probably at the expense of pedestrians, to those cycle parking areas. And so it's disappointing to hear Mr. Hart, on behalf of Steer Davis-Glebe, describe significant provision being built into the infrastructure as being excessive. And it's not something with which VIG would agree.
Okay. Thank you.
Simon Bainham, Westminster Property Association. I am a fan of cycle racks, but I do have a concern about them externally outside retail properties. They tend to be quite long things of 15, 20 metres, and they do create a barrier to the shops, unlike car spaces where you can get between the cars. So if you do have cycle racks, there should be breaks every 5 metres or so pedestrians can get through.
Okay, thank you.
So, sorry, just in response to that, all it was just about a reasonable level of cycle parking, and that sometimes they do become excessive beyond any reasonably expected mode share for cyclists.
Thank you.
Julian Robinson, LSE. With regard to the Mayor's cycle scheme, that's something that the LSE would support. However, I think Westminster should take the view that rather than taking away pedestrian space, which is in short supply, as we've heard, that should actually be put on curb build-outs and actually sort of take road space rather than pedestrian space.
Okay, thank you.
Ben Davis, Heart of London Business Alliance. Just a quick one on the secure cycle facilities and the shower facilities. I know that Westminster have been successful in securing some funding from Cross River Partnerships, so they're working in partnership to actually make sort of a shared use space, so it's available for residents and visitors to a particular area. So it's a collective use, so just supporting that really, that's a positive step.
I was just going to say that actually, in relation to the points that were made about the cycle hire scheme, that they are far more immediate than the city management plan, because Westminster Council has been supportive from the outset of that, and I expect to take a decision imminently, which will agree to our participation in the scheme. We've already identified the location of the sites, 160 sites I think it is, throughout Westminster, where they will be located, the first phase of sites. And in relation to the point that the back made there, a good number of those are actually on the highway. We've obviously tried to position them so that they recognise both pedestrians and vehicular traffic. So some of them are also on private land as well.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there any other points we want to raise in terms of providing for cyclists?